Our first speaker is Ting Jiang. She's a behavioral scientist and a researcher at Duke's Center for Advanced Hindsight. And she'll be sharing a little bit about what she thinks is a sort of dark age of mind and meaning. And how do we get out of it? How do we enter the Enlightenment era of mind and meaning? So let's join Ting now.
Thank you for having me here. So I work at Dana Realist Lab at Duke University, and our center's name is called Center for Advanced Hindsight. It's actually an actual nudge, keeping us aware of how we don't know things in foresight, and we only know it in hindsight or post-rationalized things.
I love that name. So yeah, share with us a little bit about the research you've been doing and what you've been working on. What is top of mind, and what are you excited about?
I am fascinated by how much we fail in promoting well-being.
Wow.
So if we look at the stats of mental health, depression, loneliness, stress, anxiety, stats of physical health, increasingly so many more people die and suffer from heart disease, cancer, diabetes. And during the lockdown time, I cannot help pondering about the question, are we really in a crisis of mind and meaning? And what is the problem really with our current approach that fails to make a real difference? Is it a problem of speed or actually direction? So our center's mission is to promote well-being, to help people be happier, be healthier. And what we need is not necessarily a tweak anymore. It might be a revolution in the approach. And I dare to provoke you that I believe, or I'm inviting you to answer this question with me. Are we in the dark ages of mind and meaning? So what's happening in the Middle Ages, in the Dark Ages, is that absence of science, absence of culture. And while we are championing in sciences like medical science and material science and rocket science, are we doing as well in human-related sciences? Not just in having, those disciplines and having those insights, but in applying them to our actual life, to real life. So if we look at all of these problems, they are as fatal as cancer, right? And if we look at heart diseases, in fact, we have scientific evidence proving that lifestyle, our behavior, our daily lives, decisions can be 4 times more effective in preventing those diseases and 2 times as effective as in curing than medicines available for them. And most unscientifically, we blame ourselves for not being successful in those lifestyle optimization and change. And once we realize what's wrong, what do? We make New Year resolutions about it. And after a month, a third of us already gave up.
They never work. Yeah.
But then we make the New Year resolution over and over. It's as if like taking that, Chinese herbal medicine. I mean, I've taken lots of Chinese herbal medicine in my life, but some of them really are not working, and we don't understand that we're not being scientific about it.
And we kind of blame ourselves, like we don't have enough willpower, or we should be able to do better. And we also maybe think that we're experts because we're human, we're inside of our bodies. And it turns out
intuitions, we have some partial knowledge about it. And it makes us very kind of comfortable just resting on those, understanding. Especially in today's world. I mean, we're we Google about things and we feel good about, those partial knowledge. We don't realize that behavioral change and human decision-making can be as technical as curing, cancer and bleeding. Changing our habits, what influences our behavior really goes beyond our attitudes and intention. There's a reason that we know not to hurt ourselves by putting our hands on fire or, cutting ourselves, but we keep on staying up at night, overeat, text and drive, or smoke, which kill ourselves. Yeah. So it's not that simple. This is quite a well-known example in behavioral science. These fascinating differences among cultures in organ donation rate. And if you look at it, you might see this maybe it's country differences. But then taking a second look, Netherlands and Belgium are very similar lowlands, right? One is having 28%, the other is 98% in organ donation. What explains the difference? Is it because one culture is more ethically minded? It turns out that the forms were designed differently. So by default, in the upper one is an opt-in. You check the box if you want to participate. And people don't check the box, they don't join. In the opt-out one, you check the box if you don't want to participate. If you don't check the box, you don't, you join. So the default is actually what people go with. And it drives these drastic differences. And when we ask them, why did you become an organ donor or not, nobody says, oh, it was the form and I just don't like to check boxes. And, it was the easiest thing to go with, just the status quo, that I was autopiloting. I didn't think too much about it. They would make up beautiful reasons, like, if I'm Anne, I care about saving people's lives. Or if I'm not, like, what if the doctors cares about saving 6 people using all of my organs instead of, really trying to save me. So this attribution to our intention and attitudes and not realizing how our environment has influenced us when we are in an autopiloting mode, and how often we are in the autopiloting mode. So really, I think the idea about choice architecture and how our external world has failed to take into account all the scientific insights that we know about human decision, and we've missed out tons of opportunities to help with our well-being, and partly the reasons why we are not making much progress, because we have been trying to put all the pressure, and people are already stressed out enough, and now like thinking that we are the problems, and so I think we need to really take a drastically different approach and get more scientific about this. In fact, I want to give you one example. So this was in China. There was a new district, and we know how difficult it is for people to get enough exercise. In the US, you have barely like 20% who meets the requirement of enough exercise portion in a daily life. So we created this design of this biking, this collective biking, and it's gamified, and the more people bike on it, the louder is the music, and the higher is the fountain. And this kind of architectural tweaks were nothing the architects were thinking of, but once we explain that there's a scientific backing of effectiveness, they all embrace it, and they know where to put them, right? How to make best use of them, and so that is the more scientific approach to external environmental design. Likewise, towards our internal world, we also need to upgrade our habits and our automatic responses, and so far, we are acting myopically in many occasions. We are drawn by immediate rewards instead of the long-term values that really matter to us. And in some way, we can go around it by gamify things and creating this like substitution of rewards that get us to do the right behavior. But on the other hand, you do need the human intelligence to truly understand what matters to us, to know what kind of tools or external methods to interact with. You still need that sort of deep understanding and the behavioral uptake. The fact that I realized that when I had a fight with my husband, it was not because we really needed that fight or we really meant everything. That was already a level of sophistication to even put up post-it to say, hey, don't have a serious discussion when you don't sleep enough. And that's a kind of interventions that would come from the self, so that there's no resistance to these effective interventions. So the mindset really also need to be trained, but not by preaching, because that's not going to work, right? So what are the ones that methods out there that have been most successful? Games, in engaging people and getting them to repeat and practice and learn from it, using experiential kind of learnings instead of boring information that just, go off the mind, once that information session is over. So the simulated and even more fascinatingly personalized way of discovery. They have their own narratives going about it. They take their own speed. There's so much autonomy. They can feel proud of that process. They own that process. It lasts. It goes into that, more automatic system and memory for those lessons learned. So this is the other part. There's lots of potential for embedding games in physical and digital space that would upgrade the human capacity. But it's important for us to identify which factors really matter in terms of our capacity to make a good impact on our well-being outcome. So last but not least, if we think about a new approach that is really based on fact, personalized learning, can we think about a living lab, in a physical space or digital space, where we embed, all of these cutting-edge interventions, but also tweak, iterate, and use a evidence-based approach. And two simple rules of thumb or principles to take with is, what is a scientific diagnosis that's not just based on intuition? If you think about a workplace, if we would intuitively think about it, we think about bonuses and training and all of those that we are feeling comfortable with. We might have witnessed, we might have personal data that it worked in the past. And it turns out that if you look at the scientific evidence and data, it might look drastically different than what you intuitively think. In this particular data set created by BEworks during the COVID-19, you see the tool identifies trust to be the number one differentiator of less productive and more productive employees, and that people are also still very productive without all of these offices and working from home, and that trust really matters. Now, would we have ever thought about that? How would we actually design a workplace that has most trust? Why is it the first time that we ever discussed about it? And in fact, this makes a lot of business case, even though in the past it has been rather intangible. So then, as and behavioral scientists collected all of this data and actually really invested in a fund that consists of psychological behavioral factors that together perform 12% better than the S&P 500 indexes. And the factors taken into account, it's not intuitive. If you think about these four factors, which ones are the better performing ones? It's not special recognition and training. It's clear expectations and honest mistakes valued. And that comes from the data. So I think I'm excited about all of the disciplines coming together and take a very holistic approach. COVID-19 really helps us not to be tied to the old normals and have this courage to take a new lens at where we are, what really matters, and that we can maybe with that change, with everything turning upside down, acknowledge what we can do and what we have not done that we could have done to really get out of the dark ages and enter a new age of human flourishing. And we need to realize that this is both an opportunity, but also where we are far
we've got a long way to go. But it's exciting though.
We're
starting.
And I think
you're interested in working with architects and urban planners and a whole bunch of different groups in different parts of the world to really help say, how could we do an intentional experiment, not just the almost accidental experiments of like COVID and things. How can we be intentional? But how can we actually pilot? I love that twin cities idea, right? The idea that you have a common health practice in the middle, but you've got one control, they just do what they do. And you've got one that you're doing little subtle interventions based on stuff we know from science, but it's more evidence-based. And let's actually do that and treat, cities as a living laboratory, but but don't turn people into lab rats. I think it's actually let people be the experimenters, but let them build on best practices that you're already learning. And in some ways, it feels like the soft sciences that, you know, a lot of people dismiss as soft science are the hardest sciences of all, because they're so intangible. It's it's meaning and the mind, and we all think we're experts, then we fall for some other fallacy, you know. This is great, and we're just so glad you could join us, and we're hoping you're able to participate as this initiative moves forward.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm excited.